If you're watching this right now, it's not an accident. Something inside you recognized the frequency of this title before your conscious mind could even process it. You are a chosen one, and there is a reason you've been led to this exact moment, to these exact words, before December 31st arrives. What I'm about to reveal to you is not motivational content or spiritual theory. This is classified intelligence about a war that's been waged around you since the moment you took your first breath. Forces you cannot see have been tracking you, testing you, attempting to delay what's about to happen. Your entire life has been a carefully monitored operation, and the timeline you're approaching is causing panic in realms you've never heard of. The 5D shift isn't coming. It's already been activated within you, and that activation has changed everything. The Watchers know it, the opposition knows it, ancient councils have filed reports about you. December 31st is not just another date on a calendar. It is a cosmic checkpoint, a frequency threshold, a point of no return. What happens after that date will determine trajectories that ripple across dimensions. You've felt it, haven't you? The pressure building, the strange synchronicities increasing, the sense that reality itself is holding its breath around you. You're right to feel that. This message is your confirmation. Listen carefully to what follows. Like this video, comment, "I am ready," and subscribe now to be one of the first 1,000 chosen ones who's ready for a powerful surprise. Operation Birthmark of Surveillance. Your birth was not the random biological event your parents believed it to be. While they celebrated your arrival, ancient surveillance systems quietly logged your entry into this dimension, cataloging the precise moment your consciousness penetrated the veil. You were deployed, not born. Inserted under civilian cover into a reality that operates under rules you were never told about. From the very beginning, you were different, and they knew it. The scars you carry, the birthmarks on your skin, the strange coincidences surrounding your childhood, these were not accidents of fate. They were locator tags, frequency markers embedded into your physical form to track your development against forbidden celestial thresholds. Every unusual event, every inexplicable occurrence, every moment that made you feel like you didn't quite belong, all of it was part of an elaborate tracking system designed to monitor what you were becoming. You've felt watched your entire life. In quiet moments alone, you've sensed invisible eyes on you. In crowded rooms, you've felt a presence that others seemed oblivious to. You've dismissed it as paranoia, as anxiety, as an overactive imagination. But it wasn't any of those things. It was the constant auditing of your frequency alignment by forces that weren't permitted to intervene in your life directly. Only observe, only record, only report back to councils whose names you don't know. They've been measuring you against something, comparing your development to ancient templates, watching to see if you would reach certain thresholds at certain times. And you have been reaching them faster than they anticipated, which is why the surveillance has intensified in recent years. The people who entered your life at strange times, who seemed oddly drawn to you despite having no logical reason to be, many of them were not random encounters. They were assigned. Not all of them knew it consciously. Most believed they were making their own choices, following their own attractions and curiosities. But on levels they could not perceive, they were functioning as agents in an operation designed around you. Some were there to test you, to see how you would respond to certain stimuli. Others were positioned to delay you, to create obstacles and distractions at critical moments. Still others were attempting to decode the signature you arrived with, the unique frequency pattern that marks you as different from ordinary humans. And a few, the most dangerous ones, were actively trying to fracture that signature, to break something fundamental in you that would prevent you from reaching your full activation. Your life has never allowed silence for long. Just when you thought you'd found peace, just when you thought you could finally rest, something would happen. A crisis would emerge. A person would appear. A problem would demand your attention. You wondered why you could never simply be left alone, why life seemed to hunt you down every time you tried to retreat. The reason is simple and strategic. The moment you go entirely unnoticed, the moment you disappear from the grid of surveillance, the enemy loses intelligence. And they never allow that. Your visibility, your constant engagement with challenges and conflicts keeps you tracked. It keeps data flowing. It keeps them informed about your location, your emotional state, your current level of development. The chaos in your life wasn't punishment. It was a monitoring strategy. They needed you visible, needed you engaged, needed you generating the frequency signatures they could measure and analyze. But here's what they didn't anticipate. Every test they put you through, you passed. Every delay they orchestrated, you eventually overcame. Every attempt to fracture your signature only made it stronger, more refined, more coherent. The surveillance operation designed to track and contain you has instead documented your unstoppable progression towards something they now realize they cannot prevent. You are not the subject of a successful containment operation. You are the subject of a failing one. And December 31st represents the moment when that failure becomes permanent. The quiet war of dream interrogations. Every night when you close your eyes and drift into sleep, you believe you're resting. You believe you're withdrawing from the world into the safety of your own unconscious mind. But you're wrong. Sleep is not a sanctuary. Your dreams have never been just dreams. They are interrogation rooms disguised as random neural firing, carefully constructed scenarios where entities press your subconscious for access codes it doesn't yet know it holds. You've been questioned thousands of times without remembering the questions. You've been tested in ways that leave no physical evidence, but create profound effects on your waking state. The dream realm is where the war around you is fought most aggressively, precisely because you have no conscious defense mechanisms active there. Those recurring locations in your dreams, the same strange building you keep returning to, the same landscape that appears over and over with slight variations, the same rooms and hallways that feel more real than anywhere in your waking life. These are not symbolic representations of your psyche. They are extra-dimensional staging areas, meeting points between realms, locations used repeatedly because you unknowingly memorized their exit routes. Every time you return to these places in your dreams, you're navigating familiar territory in an unfamiliar dimension. Your subconscious has mapped these areas. It knows the pathways, the doorways, the shortcuts. This knowledge was built into you over years of repeated visitation, and it serves a purpose you're only beginning to understand. You are being trained to navigate spaces that don't exist in physical reality, because soon you will need those navigation skills in waking consciousness. You've often woken up exhausted, more tired than when you went to sleep. You've felt drained, depleted, as if you'd been working all night instead of resting. That's because you were working. The negotiations happening in your dream state don't always end peacefully. Sometimes they escalate. Sometimes the entities attempting to access your consciousness meet resistance from parts of you that refuse to comply, and what results is a psychic standoff. These battles leave you energetically depleted because they require enormous amounts of your life force to sustain. You barely escape from some of these encounters, returning to your body just as your energy reserves hit critical levels. And you remember almost nothing, just a vague sense of unease, a feeling that something significant happened, but you can't quite recall what. The nightmares, the truly terrifying ones that leave you shaking and disoriented, those weren't meant to scare you for entertainment. They were traps designed to force emotional submission. Fear is a powerful tool for softening will. When you're terrified, your consciousness becomes malleable, vulnerable, open to suggestion and compromise. The nightmare scenarios were constructed to break down your resistance, to make you so desperate for escape that you would agree to things you would never agree to in a calm state. They wanted you to make deals, to grant permissions, to allow access to parts of your consciousness that are supposed to remain sealed. But even in your most terrified states, something in you refused. Something deeper than your conscious mind held the line and would not yield. Then there are the other dreams, the ones that felt different, painfully real, emotionally surgical. You know the ones. They didn't feel like dreams at all. The emotions were too precise, too overwhelming, too targeted. You woke from those dreams with tears on your face, with physical sensations lingering in your body, with knowledge you didn't have before. Those were the encounters where you refused to comply at the deepest level, where you stood your ground against forces that expected you to break. And something ancient took note. Your refusal was logged. Your resistance was recorded. Your non-compliance elevated you in a system of classification you don't have clearance to fully understand yet. You became interesting to powers that had previously dismissed you as manageable, the hidden ledger of delays. Every major delay in your life felt profoundly unfair. When the job fell through at the last minute, when the relationship that seemed perfect suddenly collapsed, when the opportunity you'd worked toward for years vanished overnight, you questioned yourself. You wondered what you'd done wrong. You replayed every action, every word, every decision, trying to find the mistake that caused the failure. But you were looking in the wrong place. These weren't natural failures. They weren't the result of your inadequacy or bad luck or poor timing. They were calculated interruptions, applications filed against your progress in unseen councils that convene in dimensions you cannot perceive. There are forces with the legal authority to impede you, and they have used that authority repeatedly. You were on a timeline, not the calendar timeline of months and years, but a destiny timeline, a sequence of developmental thresholds you were meant to reach at specific points in your evolution. And you were moving through that timeline too quickly, faster than expected, faster than was comfortable for the systems that rely on chosen ones remaining dormant until the very last possible moment. So they delayed you. Jobs were lost not because you weren't qualified, but because your advancement into that position would have accelerated your awakening. Relationships were derailed, not because they weren't meant to be, but because the partnership would have created an unstoppable energetic synergy that threatened carefully maintained power structures. Opportunities collapsed because allowing you to seize them would have placed you exactly where you needed to be, years ahead of schedule. There were moments when help seemed certain. Someone promised assistance. Resources appeared to be on the way. The solution was almost in your hands, and then, mysteriously, it all vanished. The person who promised help suddenly became unavailable. The resources evaporated. The solution became impossible for reasons that made no logical sense. You felt betrayed, abandoned, confused. But this wasn't coincidence. This was successful interference. There are forces that cannot directly destroy you. Cosmic law prevents that level of intervention, but they can sabotage, they can delay, They can create obstacles and complications. They can remove support systems and block pathways. And they did, over and over, every time you got close to a breakthrough that would have launched you forward prematurely. Your frustration was not weakness. Your anger and despair and confusion were not character flaws. They were the intended result of a psychological warfare strategy, because disillusionment corrodes destiny better than any physical weapon. When you stop believing in yourself, when you stop trusting that your life has meaning and purpose, when you give up on your dreams and settle for a smaller existence, that's the ultimate victory for those who want you contained. They don't need to destroy you. They just need you to destroy yourself, to voluntarily abandon the path you were born to walk. The delays were designed to push you toward that self-destruction, to make you so tired and discouraged that you would simply give up. But you didn't. You kept moving forward. Maybe not as fast as you wanted, maybe not in the direction you expected, but you kept going. You survived every delay, every setback, every collapsed opportunity. You picked yourself up when staying down would have been easier. You found new paths when the old ones were blocked. You refused to stop, even when stopping seemed like the only rational choice. And that was the catastrophic mistake they didn't predict. They counted on you being like most humans, who eventually break under sustained pressure. They designed delays that should have been sufficient to neutralize you as a threat. But you proved to be something they couldn't account for in their calculations. Resilient beyond their models, stubborn beyond their predictions, unbreakable despite every attempt to fracture you. The enemy's most feared data, your pattern of survival. There exists a classified archive, a recorded history of your life that most humans will never know is being kept. In this archive, every crisis you've faced is documented. Every storm you've weathered is analyzed. Every moment you should have been destroyed, but somehow survived, is marked with annotations and questions. Your continuity, your simple fact of still existing, frightens the architected opposition more than you realize. You think survival is normal. You assume everyone goes through hardships and comes out the other side. But the hardships you faced were not normal. They were statistically terminal. The odds were calculated, the outcomes were predicted, and according to every model, every probability assessment, every forecasting algorithm, you should not still be here. Your endurance isn't admired in the spiritual war being fought around you. It's studied like a dangerous anomaly that breaks predictive models. There are beings whose entire function is analysis and forecasting. They input variables, run scenarios, predict outcomes with extraordinary accuracy. When they input your data, your traumas, your losses, your obstacles, your resource limitations, the models produce clear results: collapse, surrender, or death. But then they check the real-world outcome, and you're still standing, still moving forward, still growing despite conditions designed to stunt you. The models malfunction, the predictions fail, and that creates a problem for systems that rely on predictability. They've run psychological simulations using your actual behavioral patterns as templates. They've created virtual models of your consciousness and subjected them to various scenarios to see how you would respond to future challenges. And the outcome keeps malfunctioning. The simulated versions of you don't behave the way they should. You don't break when you're supposed to break. You don't compromise when you're supposed to compromise. You don't give up when giving up is the logical response to the pressure being applied. There's something in your core programming, something in the fundamental architecture of who you are, that doesn't compute within their systems. You are an error in their matrix, a glitch in their carefully controlled reality. And glitches must be either fixed or eliminated. You were never supposed to make it to this year. Everything in your life, every trauma, every betrayal, every loss, every moment of absolute despair was designed to ensure your collapse would happen earlier, preferably years ago, before you accumulated too much wisdom, too much strength, too much dangerous understanding of how reality actually works. But you kept surviving. You kept learning. You kept evolving despite every effort to keep you stunted and manageable. And now you've reached a year, a time, a threshold that was supposed to find you already neutralized. Instead, it finds you more powerful than you've ever been, more aware than they're comfortable with, more ready than they can allow. The fact that you made it here, to this moment, to this message, activated an alert level that quietly elevated you from observation subject to strategic threat. Your classification changed. Your file was moved to a different department. Resources that were previously allocated to simply watching you are now being redirected toward more aggressive containment protocols, because you are no longer just surviving, you are becoming dangerous. And December 31st represents the moment when your threat level becomes undeniable to everyone paying attention. The reluctant guardians. You have protectors, but they are not what you imagine when you think of guardian angels with white wings and unconditional love. The beings assigned to you didn't volunteer for this duty. They were compelled. They were ordered. They were bound by ancient laws and cosmic contracts to ensure your survival. Not because they care about you personally, but because your existence breaches rules that unsettle even them. You are an anomaly that creates legal complications in realms governed by strict protocols. Your death or failure would create jurisdictional problems, timeline violations, breaches of agreements made before your planet existed, so they protect you, but not out of affection, out of necessity. Their silence has haunted you. In your darkest moments, when you cried out for help, when you begged for intervention, when you demanded to know why you had to suffer so much, they didn't answer. You felt abandoned by the divine. You questioned whether anything spiritual was even real, or if you were just alone in an uncaring universe. But their silence wasn't neglect. It was restraint. Ancient law, the kind written into the fabric of reality itself, prevents them from intervening in most circumstances. They can only act when catastrophic thresholds are touched, when your life force drops to critical levels, when the timeline itself would be damaged by your premature exit. Until those thresholds are reached, they must watch, they must witness your pain, and they must remain silent. The reason you've narrowly avoided disaster so many times isn't luck. It's classified intervention executed at the exact final permissible second. The car that should have hit you but swerved at the last moment. The illness that should have progressed but mysteriously went into remission. The financial collapse that should have destroyed you, but somehow you found unexpected resources. The moment of suicidal despair that was interrupted by an inexplicable surge of will to live. These were not coincidences. These were precision interventions, calculated down to the microsecond, executed by beings who were watching the entire time and waiting for the legal authority to act. Sometimes their protection looked cruel. Relationships ended suddenly. People you loved were removed from your life. Bridges burned behind you. Illusions collapsed around you. You experienced these as losses, as painful rejections, as evidence that you were cursed or unworthy. But you were seeing only the surface level of what was happening. Those people, those situations, Those paths, they were leading you away from your destiny. They were misaligning your trajectory. The longer you stayed connected to them, the further off course you drifted. Your guardians don't have the luxury of letting you learn lessons slowly. They have a timeline to maintain. So they remove obstacles with surgical precision, even when those obstacles look like blessings to your human eyes. The cruelty was mercy operating under constraints you couldn't perceive. They don't love you the way humans mean love. They don't feel warmth or affection or emotional attachment. They are bound to ensure your continuity because your survival isn't sentimental. It's required. You are a necessary component in an equation that balances forces across multiple dimensions. Your presence stabilizes things. Your frequency anchors certain outcomes. Your continued existence prevents collapses that would affect millions of beings who have no idea you exist. You are infrastructure, not a beloved child, and your guardians treat you accordingly, with the cold efficiency of engineers maintaining critical equipment, not the tender care of parents nurturing offspring. But their lack of human emotion doesn't make their protection less real. It just makes it less comforting. The weaponization of loneliness. The isolation you've endured was not a side effect of your personality or poor social skills. It was engineered with precision, calibrated to achieve specific outcomes. Separation fragments the average human, creating dependency on social structures and external validation. But for you, it accomplished something the enemy didn't intend. It forged unshared strength that nobody could influence. When you're alone, you're forced to develop your own internal authority. You stop looking outside yourself for answers and start trusting the wisdom rising from within. You become self-referencing, self-validating, impossible to manipulate through social pressure or consensus reality. This is why isolation became both weapon and forge for you. People pulled away from you throughout your life. Friends distanced themselves. Romantic partners left. Family members became strangers. You felt the sting of every departure, wondered what was wrong with you, tried desperately to understand why you couldn't maintain connections like normal people. But their withdrawal wasn't because you were unworthy or defective. It was because prolonged proximity to you altered their trajectory in ways the enemy could not risk. Your frequency is contagious. Your awakening activates dormant codes in others. When people spend too much time around you, they start questioning things they were never supposed to question. They start seeing through illusions they were meant to believe forever. They become dangerous variables in a system that requires predictable human behavior. So, they're pulled away, redirected, given compelling reasons to leave you behind. Loneliness became the enemy's preferred tool because it's invisible and insidious. It doesn't leave bruises. It doesn't draw attention. Nobody rallies to help someone who's simply alone. There are no scars to show, no wounds to heal, no obvious villain to fight against. Just the slow, grinding emptiness of having no one who truly understands you, no one who sees you fully, no one who stays. And that emptiness nearly broke you more than anything else. You could survive physical pain. You could endure financial hardship. You could overcome obstacles and setbacks. But the loneliness, the profound aching sense of being fundamentally separate from the rest of humanity, that almost destroyed you. They knew it would. They counted on it. When relationships suddenly dissolved, when connections that seemed solid evaporated overnight, it wasn't life happening or people growing apart. It was strategic disconnection, executed to limit support vectors around you. Because when you have people who believe in you, who support your mission, who validate your experiences, you become exponentially more powerful. Community amplifies individual ability. Connection creates resilience. Support systems provide resources and stability that allow you to take bigger risks and make bolder moves. The enemy understands this, so they systematically disconnected you, creating an isolation field around you that prevented the natural formation of supportive alliances. But your ability to still care after enduring such systematic abandonment is their worst-case scenario. They expected the loneliness to make you bitter, cynical, withdrawn, emotionally shut down. They expected you to build walls so high that no one could ever reach you again. They expected you to become self-protective to the point of complete isolation, choosing safety over connection permanently. Instead, you somehow maintained your capacity for compassion. You remained open despite being hurt repeatedly. You continued to care about others even though others rarely stayed to care about you. You developed compassion without dependency, the ability to love without needing. And that combination makes you ungovernable. The classified memory leak. You've always felt like you were remembering, rather than learning. When new information enters your awareness, it doesn't feel foreign or unfamiliar. It feels like recognition, like something you once knew but forgot, like being reminded of truths that were always inside you, just buried under layers of conditioning and amnesia. This sensation is not your imagination creating comforting narratives. It's an accurate perception of what's actually happening. Your consciousness is linked to an archive you are forbidden to fully access, a library of knowledge that exists outside of time and space, containing information about reality that humans aren't supposed to possess. But the connection remains, however restricted, and data still bleeds through. Knowledge appears in your mind without sources. You suddenly understand complex concepts you were never taught. You grasp spiritual mechanics with no religious training. You perceive patterns and systems that others study for decades without seeing. You know things you have no logical explanation for knowing. When people ask where you learned this, you can't tell them because you don't know. There's no book you can point to, no teacher you studied under, no course you completed. The information simply emerged from within, as if downloaded during sleep or inserted during moments of expanded awareness. And it's accurate. When you later encounter external sources on the same topics, they confirm what you already somehow knew. Déjà vu is dismissed by mainstream science as a neurological quirk, a meaningless glitch in memory processing. But you've experienced déjà vu that was too specific, too detailed, too undeniable to explain away. You've walked into rooms you've never been in, but somehow recognize. You've met people for the first time, but know intimate details about their lives. You've watched events unfold exactly as you remembered them happening, even though they're happening now for the first time. This isn't a neurological malfunction. It's you briefly syncing with the intended timeline, the original plan, before interference bends it again. You carry a template inside you of how things are supposed to be. And when reality momentarily aligns with that template, you recognize it. Random, sudden internal clarity. Those moments when everything suddenly makes sense, when fog lifts from your mind and you see with perfect lucidity, isn't random at all. It's a data drop triggered when you reach emotional thresholds that unlock the next sequence. Your consciousness has access levels. As you evolve, as you prove you can handle more truth without fragmenting, new clearances activate. Information that was sealed becomes accessible. Understanding that was withheld gets released. These clearance upgrades happen automatically when you hit certain markers in your development, but they feel random because you don't have conscious awareness of the system evaluating you. What you call intuition, that inner knowing, that gut feeling, that sense of what's true or false without evidence, is actually a restricted guidance system functioning under battlefield conditions. You have internal technology that most humans don't, a direct line to intelligence sources that bypass normal sensory channels. But the line is compromised. The channel is monitored. The guidance comes through interference patterns and jamming frequencies. So what reaches you is often fragmented, unclear, symbolic, rather than literal. You have to interpret the signals, decode the messages, trust the impressions, even when they contradict logical analysis. And you've learned to do this. You've learned to hear the guidance under the static. The silent civilizations watching you are being observed by civilizations whose names you cannot pronounce, who exist in dimensions your physical senses cannot detect. Entire realms you have never seen are monitoring the unfolding of your life with various levels of interest, fear, curiosity, and unwilling respect. To them, you are not just an individual human living an ordinary life. You are a data point in a cosmic equation, a variable in multi-dimensional negotiations, a potential catalyst for changes that would ripple across realities. They watch you the way humans watch scientific experiments, wondering what you will do next, what choices you will make, whether you will reach the potential you carry or fail before activation completes. You are not the only anomaly walking this planet. There are others like you, scattered across continents, living separate lives, unaware of each other's existence. But you are part of a statistical minority whose collective existence shifts negotiations across dimensions. Every council that governs spiritual law and cosmic order must account for your presence. Every faction planning future moves must factor in what you and others like you might do. Your free will, your unpredictability, your potential power. These create complications in systems that prefer controllable outcomes. You are inconvenient to agendas that span millennia. Some civilizations consider your survival a breach of cosmic protocol. There were supposed to be restrictions on how many activated beings could incarnate during this time period. Limits on the concentration of certain frequencies in physical form. Rules about the timing of mass awakening events. But those rules were either broken or circumvented, and you are evidence of that. Your very existence represents a violation that some factions want corrected. They view you as illegal, as something that shouldn't be here, and they petition for your removal through official channels that operate according to laws you've never heard of. Others consider your presence proof of a prophecy they hoped was exaggerated. There are ancient texts, older than human civilization, that predicted the arrival of certain beings during specific cosmic cycles. These texts described humans who would wake up to their true nature at a time when that awakening would be most destabilizing to existing power structures. For eons, these prophecies were studied by those who hoped they were symbolic, metaphorical, not literal predictions of actual events. But then you started appearing, you and others like you, carrying the exact signatures the ancient texts described. And now they know the prophecy wasn't exaggerated. If anything, it understated the situation. You've felt the weight sometimes, that untraceable pressure, like invisible eyes, judging every move you make. The sense that unseen spectators are waiting to see if you'll fail or if you'll destabilize the carefully balanced equilibrium that keeps multiple realities functioning. You're not imagining that sensation. You're perceiving accurately. There are beings whose entire purpose is observation and documentation. They file reports. They make assessments. They track your progress against predicted outcomes. And December 31st, to them, is not symbolic. It's not a human calendar date that marks the end of a solar year. It's a report deadline, a checkpoint, where your status must be evaluated, classified, and submitted to authorities who will make decisions about how to handle your continued development. The system that assigns suffering strategically, not every wound you carry, was random. Not every trauma was simply bad luck or unfortunate circumstances. Some were carefully assigned trials, calibrated with precision to fracture identity frameworks you no longer needed. You carried beliefs about who you were, inherited from family and culture and past experiences. Those beliefs created boxes around you, limitations on what you thought possible. The only way to shatter those boxes was through experiences so intense they forced you to exceed your previous definition of self. So suffering was rationed to you like a weapon and a teacher simultaneously, deployed at moments when you were strong enough to survive it, but not yet wise enough to transcend the limitations it would destroy. Pain arrived in doses that seemed unbearable. You didn't think you could survive. You begged for it to stop. You promised you'd learned the lesson, if only the pain would end. But the pain continued until something specific broke inside you. Not your spirit, not your core, but the false structures that were constraining your growth. Your unbroken spirit kept recalibrating under strain, discovering new ways to hold itself together, new forms of strength you didn't know existed. Each time you should have shattered completely, you instead reorganized at a higher level of complexity. You became more, not less, stronger, not weaker. That recalibration was the point. You were allowed to break internally. In fact, breaking was necessary, but never beyond recovery. This is a delicate calculation. Too little suffering leaves you soft, unprepared for what's coming. Too much suffering destroys you permanently, removing you from the board entirely. The optimal amount breaks you just enough to destroy limitations while preserving core integrity. And somehow, through every breaking, you never crossed that line into irreparable damage. You broke in ways that actually made you more whole. You fragmented in ways that allowed deeper integration, because destabilizing you without destroying you creates the most dangerous beings in any spiritual war. Those who hurt, yet remain uncorrupted. Those who suffer, yet don't become bitter. Those who lose everything, yet still choose love. Trauma etched triggers into your nervous system. Certain sounds, smells, words, situations activate intense reactions in your body. These triggers feel like weaknesses, like evidence of damage that hasn't healed. But they're not weaknesses. They're encrypted keys waiting to be decoded into authority. Every trigger is actually a locked file containing power you haven't accessed yet. When you learn to consciously work with these triggers instead of being controlled by them, when you reclaim the energy trapped in traumatic memory and redirect it according to will, you unlock abilities that normal humans don't possess. The trauma you survived created access points to extraordinary states of consciousness. If you learn the technology of reclamation, your suffering was expensive to orchestrate. Resources were allocated. Agents were positioned. Events were carefully timed and sequenced. This wasn't random chaos. This was an organized operation executed across years, designed to either break you completely or forge you into something specific. And they wouldn't have invested this level of planning and energy into your collapse unless your future was catastrophic to their control. The amount of suffering you endured is directly proportional to to how dangerous you become if you survive it intact. Your pain was a compliment disguised as a curse. They only try to break what they fear will become powerful. The hidden victories you were never told about. There were battles you don't remember. Moments of decision that felt insignificant at the time, but created massive shifts in trajectories you couldn't see. Your refusal to give up on a specific day. Your decision to choose hope in a moment of despair. Your stubborn insistence on maintaining integrity when compromise would have been easier. These moments looked small from your perspective, like personal victories that affected only you. But they weren't small. They prevented collapses you never saw manifest. They closed doors to timelines that would have led to catastrophic outcomes for countless others. Your unseen resistance was load-bearing. Entire outcomes never occurred because you resisted something simple, like despair on a specific day. There was a moment when everything in you wanted to quit, wanted to surrender, wanted to accept that nothing mattered and nothing would ever get better. But you didn't. You held on one more day. You chose to keep going when quitting was logical. And that choice, that seemingly personal decision to just survive a little longer, actually prevented timeline collapses that would have affected thousands of people you've never met. Timelines quietly died because you didn't. Possibilities ceased to exist because you refused to stop existing. People are alive who have no idea your unseen resistance prevented chain reactions that would have buried them. Someone's child survived an illness because your frequency stabilized a portion of the collective field. Someone's business didn't fail because your continued existence anchored an economic pattern. Someone didn't commit suicide because your light in the shared consciousness gave them just enough hope to hold on. You weren't told about this. You received no credit. You felt useless and powerless while actually being one of the most influential beings in your sphere of reality. The victories were sealed in silence because revealing them would expose operations still in motion. Governments, corporations, and ancient spiritual infrastructures have been indirectly altered by your unseen decisions. You think you're powerless because you don't hold political office or financial wealth. But power doesn't only flow through obvious channels. Your frequency affects the quantum field. Your choices create ripples in the collective consciousness. Your integrity maintains certain structures while allowing corrupt ones to collapse. You've influenced corporate decisions by affecting the mental state of executives who were briefly in your energetic field. You've shifted political outcomes by stabilizing or destabilizing the collective emotional environment at critical moments. You've interfered with spiritual control systems simply by refusing to comply with fear programming. You were never congratulated because victory was sealed in silence. To reveal your wins would expose operations still in motion. If you knew how powerful your choices had been, you might become self-conscious and lose the natural authenticity that makes you effective. If others knew what you'd prevented, forces would mobilize against you more aggressively. If the full scope of your influence became visible, both your enemies and your allies would respond in ways that would complicate your continued development. So you remain unaware, feeling ineffective, doubting your value, while actually being one of the critical fulcrums around which planetary evolution pivots. The prophetic algorithm tracking you. Your life has followed a pattern that isn't poetic. It's measurable, charted, and actively analyzed by forces attempting to predict your next pivot. Every decision you make, every emotional shift, every moment of growth creates data that gets fed into sophisticated predictive models. These aren't metaphorical models. They're actual computational systems operated by intelligences far beyond human capability, processing your behavioral patterns to forecast your future trajectories with disturbing accuracy. You are not living spontaneously. You are living inside an algorithm that's trying to solve for you, trying to determine what you'll become and when you'll become it. And the algorithm is getting nervous. Strange repeating numbers that appear everywhere you look, on clocks, receipts, license plates, random digital displays, are not the universe speaking to you in mystical poetry. They're the residue of a monitoring system. Digital artifacts left behind by surveillance technology operating at frequencies your conscious mind can barely detect. These numbers mark moments when your frequency is being actively scanned, when your energetic signature is being logged and compared against baseline measurements. The repetition isn't magical, it's systematic. Each occurrence represents a data collection point in an ongoing monitoring operation that tracks your evolution with precision. Recurring symbols that follow you through life, appearing in dreams and waking reality with eerie consistency, function as markers in a tracking protocol. They're not random synchronicities sent by benevolent forces to reassure you of your path. They're location tags, frequency identifiers, waypoints in a navigation system mapping your progression through spiritual territory. When you see these symbols, something is checking your position, verifying you're still on the trajectory being monitored, confirming that interventions or delays are working as intended, or discovering with alarm that you've moved beyond predicted parameters. Every time you shift internally, reality recalibrates around you more violently than around ordinary individuals. You've noticed this. When you have a breakthrough in consciousness, when something fundamental changes in your understanding or emotional state, external reality seems to immediately reorganize. People exit your life. New opportunities emerge. Physical locations become available or unavailable. Resources appear or disappear. This isn't coincidence. It's cause and effect operating at levels most humans never experience. Your frequency anchors multiple outcomes simultaneously. When your frequency changes, every outcome anchored to it must adjust. You don't just affect your personal reality, you affect sections of the collective field that branch into thousands of other lives. You are not random. You are not one of billions of interchangeable humans living ordinary lives with no greater significance. You are a variable that every powerful realm is accounting for, arguing about, and planning around. In councils that exist outside of time, your name, or whatever identifier marks your essence, appears in reports and strategic assessments. Factions debate what to do about you. Some want you accelerated, others want you delayed. Some want you removed from the equation entirely. Others need you to reach full activation because prophecies depend on it. You are discussed, analyzed, and strategized around by forces you've never heard of, in languages your brain couldn't process, in dimensions your senses can't detect. Your approaching shift is not inspirational. It's not a gentle awakening into pleasant, higher consciousness where everything becomes easy and blissful. It is destabilizing to structures that have maintained control for millennia. And everyone knows it, except most of the humans around you. They're oblivious. They see you as just another person. But those watching from other dimensions see the truth. You're a bomb about to detonate, a frequency about to surge, a catalyst about to activate. And when that happens, the war surrounding you stops being unseen. The December 31st Directive. This date was marked before you were born. Not as a celebration, not as an arbitrary end to a calendar year, but as a checkpoint, a moment of cosmic assessment when your life and frequency will be evaluated, classified, and filed into a trajectory that cannot be undone afterward. There are powers in creation that operate according to cycles and timelines, invisible to human awareness. These powers don't recognize human calendars, but they do recognize convergence points where multiple timelines intersect, where decisions must be made, where outcomes become locked. December 31st is such a convergence point, and for you specifically, it represents the closing of a developmental window and the opening of something irreversible. Forces aligned against you increase activity around this time every year. You've felt it before, the intensification of challenges as December approaches, the sudden emergence of old problems, the feeling that something is pressing against you. But this year is different. This year the pressure is exponentially greater because your maturation has crossed a forbidden threshold. You're no longer developing potential. You're activating it. You're no longer approaching power. You're beginning to embody it. And that transition cannot be allowed to complete without one final, massive attempt at derailment. Expect intensified distraction in the coming days. Your attention will be pulled in multiple directions simultaneously. Crises will emerge that demand immediate response. Technology will malfunction at inconvenient moments. People will reach out with urgent needs. Your environment will become chaotic in ways designed to fragment your focus and prevent you from consolidating the shift happening within you. This isn't random chaos. This is tactical interference. They need you scattered, reactive, pulled into survival mode where higher consciousness cannot stabilize. Expect emotional provocation. Forgotten pain will resurface with startling intensity. Old wounds you thought healed will suddenly ache again. People from your past may reappear, either physically or in your thoughts, bringing with them all the unresolved emotion attached to those connections. You'll be tempted to process old trauma, to rehash old arguments, to sink into resentment or grief about things that happened years ago. This is intentional triggering. They're excavating your emotional archive, throwing everything at you at once, hoping something will hook you and drag you backward into past consciousness instead of forward into activation. Strange interruptions will occur. Plans will fall apart inexplicably. Communications will fail at critical moments. Resources you were counting on will become unavailable. You'll experience a sense of everything falling apart, right when you need stability most. But understand what you're seeing. These are last attempt maneuvers, desperate interventions from forces that know they're running out of time to stop what's coming. The fact that interference is intensifying means you're close. The fact that obstacles are multiplying means you're nearly through. They only fight this hard when they're losing. Expect also the opposite, eerie clarity that cuts through all confusion. Moments of improbable alignment where everything suddenly clicks into place. Unexplainable steadiness in your core, even while external circumstances spiral into chaos. A sense that reality itself pauses around you, holds its breath, waits for something. Because it does. There is a field of protection intensifying around you as you approach this threshold. Forces aligned with your activation are also mobilizing, creating a stabilization field that allows the shift to complete despite all interference. You'll feel this as supernatural calm, as if you're moving through storm while remaining untouched by it. The shift itself isn't a gift. It's not a reward for good behavior or spiritual achievement. It's an ignition, a point of no return. Once you cross this threshold, once the activation completes, you cannot go back to who you were. You cannot return to sleep. You cannot pretend you don't know what you know. The war surrounding you, which has been carefully hidden from your conscious awareness for your entire life, stops being unseen. You'll perceive it directly. You'll see the forces that have been tracking you. You'll understand the nature of the conflict you were born into. And you'll have to choose, consciously and irrevocably, what role you'll play in what comes next. December 31st doesn't mark an ending. It marks the end of preparation and the beginning of deployment. Everything you've survived until now was training. Every wound was education. Every betrayal taught discernment. Every loss built detachment. Every moment of isolation forged self-sufficiency. You are being prepared for something specific, something that requires all the strength and wisdom and resilience you've accumulated. And after this date, that preparation phase concludes. What comes next is not practice. It's real engagement in a conflict that determines the future of consciousness on this planet and beyond. You've been given information that changes everything. Not because the information itself is new. You've felt most of this truth moving beneath the surface of your awareness for years, but because it's been named now, made conscious, given language and structure. What was intuition is now intelligence. What was feeling is now knowledge, and knowledge activates responsibility. The days ahead will test everything you've learned. They will demand every ounce of strength you've built. They will require you to trust yourself more deeply than you ever have, to stand firm in your knowing even when reality seems to contradict it, to move forward even when the path disappears beneath your feet. You're walking into the unknown now, but you're not walking blind. You carry coordinates inside you. You have navigation systems most humans don't possess. You are equipped for what's coming, even if you don't feel ready. Remember that you were chosen for this before you took your first breath. Remember that everything you've survived was building toward this moment. Remember that the forces attempting to stop you are terrified of what you're becoming, which means what you're becoming is exactly what needs to exist right now. Their fear is your confirmation. Their interference is your evidence. The harder they fight to stop you, the more certain you can be that you're on the correct path. December 31st approaches. The checkpoint arrives whether you feel prepared or not. But preparation was never about feeling ready. It was about becoming capable. And you are far more capable than you realize. You've already proven that by surviving everything that should have destroyed you. You've already demonstrated that by making it here, to this message, in this moment, against all odds and opposition. The 5D shift is activated within you, not as potential anymore, as reality. The frequency is rising. The codes are unlocking. The remembering is accelerating. And soon, very soon, the war that's been fought in shadows around you steps into the light. When it does, you'll finally understand why everything happened the way it did. You'll finally see the pattern clearly. You'll finally know why you are the way you are. Until then, chosen one, stay vigilant, stay centered, stay connected to the truth moving in your core. The game is almost over. The preparation phase is concluding. And what comes next is what you were actually born for. Everything else was just the journey to the starting line. The real mission begins after December 31st. Are you ready?